we have presenting Steve Broadwell and Simon Giddings from OPSWAT. And their presentation is going to be on the comprehensive file data and removable media protection for real-time OT networks, which is a mouthful. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. As I said, we will record this and it goes on the YouTube channel for future reference for those who wanted to join but unfortunately couldn't make it. We will be, or there will be a Q&A session at the end for anyone who's got any questions for the guys from OPSWAT. Just regarding Tech Talks, we have one planned for January next year on the 15th, which is around closed loop control and real-time optimization, which looks really interesting. And we're currently trying to secure one from Seller Controls in February and Valves in March. So things for Tech Talks are making progress, should we say. So just watch out for future comms regarding these. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to introduce himself and the presentation. So off you go, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate that. Thank you. Hi, guys. Simon Giddings, account manager for the industry side at OPSWAT. I've worked with OPSWAT now for over 12 months. And it was great also, guys, to be at the awards in October as well, and the Apprentice Award. So I'll give you a shout out there as well. Thanks very much for the invite on that. So the talk today is going to focus on basically the OT space and data. I think everyone in the industry sort of focuses a lot around asset and visibility. Our discussion really is going to talk about the risks associated with not only files and file transfers, but also USBs. And I know prior to the call there, we were talking about current threats in the current world and the landscape and how sort of this is going to affect critical national infrastructure. So OPSWAT as a business, our sort of go-to and messaging is very much focused around protecting the world's critical infrastructure. We do that across a number of sort of verticals within that sector. So, you know, obviously we have a very strong play within defense, within nuclear, within utilities, within energy, manufacturing. You can see there, these are all areas of key focus. But from an OPSWAT point, who are OPSWAT? You know, OPSWAT are now 20 years old. We'll actually be 21 years old in January. So the company's been around for a long time, and we've been able to build a very sustainable business and a very sort of unique platform, which we'll talk to you about as well, in terms of how we've collaborated with a number of other vendors to highlight threats and known threats. From a country perspective, in terms of countries served, we work with some of the largest companies in the world. So therefore, we have to work and support these companies in multiple countries. So right now, the business supports over 80 countries. We have 2,000 customers plus globally. Over 900 employees now. And one of the key areas, and this is down to regulation, which is more US based today, but we're seeing it more and more come into Europe, and that we do have a footprint across 98% of US nuclear facilities. And we'll talk you through how we've achieved that and why. And then one piece I always highlight, and it's always good to talk about these and just share, is that we do have what we call our OPSWAT Academy. So any customer who joins OPSWAT and becomes a customer of OPSWAT, they get access to our training. Now that's training modules for people who are using the technology, deploying the technology, and those who are potentially, they work on the reception within these facilities, nuclear facilities, energy facilities, so that they understand and embrace as to why this technology is being implemented. There's some awards on the right hand side. I won't dwell on those too much. We'll get into the technical stuff, but always good to share. And this is just a global view of OPSWAT as a business. So as I said, nearly 21 years old. We've got a global footprint, which means we can support customers 24/7. This slide just gives a high level view as to some of the customers we have. I always sort of raise this because obviously we talk to a lot of people within the industry sector. Obviously a number of those are highlighted, but we're keen to highlight the benefit around the technology, but also the core of the technology. And over the last probably the last 2 years, we've seen a significant rise in customers in the finance space on board OPSWAT. So if you and I were to go to NatWest for a mortgage, NatWest actually use the software to sanitize the files they receive from mortgage applications. So before it goes through to an admin on a mortgage desk, that file has been validated clean by the OPSWAT technology, which we'll talk you through as well at a core level. So we do have a few corporate slides. I think this one just highlights sort of that networks are complex and they're always under attack, but this slide really drives home the OPSWAT portfolio. So those of you who are familiar with the Purdue model, you can see right there we have a product fit in sort of 1.5 right the way through to IT. Today we're going to talk about the kiosk. We're probably going to touch on data diodes. NetWalls is our sort of name for those, product name for those. Managed file transfer. And we may touch on what we call our MD drive, which is to help enable customers to allow third-party laptops on site. So we'll talk you through how that technology is now enabling people to allow third-party laptops on site as well. So we'll go into that from there. One of the key areas on this, this is more of a marketing slide, but I know myself and Steve decided to pull together what we'll go through shortly, a whiteboard on this technology. But going on to the next slide, I think this one more so again, Steve, it's probably you're not the biggest fan of this slide, but it gives a very good view, I guess, in terms of the technology and the features within the Meta Defender core, and obviously from a deployment perspective as well, right?
Yeah. Okay, mate. Do you want me to take over now, or?
Yeah, go for it, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries, guys. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And when customers, if I'm going to be honest, generally ask me about OT security, the first step they're always expecting to talk about is visibility, which makes a lot of sense. And if you look at many of the best practices, the maturity assessments, advice, things like that, you always start with, as you all know, visibility. Know thyself. How do you protect what you don't know? But the discussion immediately jumps into asset inventory, firmware versions, OT protocol analysis, baselines, anomaly detection, which is great, definitely required. But what about visibility into the data itself? What about visibility into the files, whether they're in motion, transit, in use, or at rest? Files like content, patches, firmware, log files, reports, configs, backups. There's lots of files that even in, let's call them air-gapped environments, that still are coming in and out, but they're still required. How are you ensuring what's coming in and out and if they're clean? And if you think about it, there's many ways that they are coming in. And I, on this slide here, just threw 5 of the main ones that people talk to me about. For instance, if we start top to the bottom, IT/OT transfer, that north-south delivery into and out of, let's say, OT, your high to low, generally across next-gen firewalls or even back-to-back firewalls. Then you've got your remote access. Many people have projects in this now that are all implementing secure remote access, allowing third parties or even remote employees direct access into your OT DMZ, your level 3.5 at the Purdue. And then you've got removable media. Again, it's a good old-fashioned USB. But this is OT, right? So it doesn't have to be a USB. This could be a floppy disk or even a PCMCIA card. I mean, it could be anything. Who knows? I mean, to be honest, there's nothing wrong with USBs. It's a convenient and easy way to transfer data. And in many, it's the only way. If you've got an old Windows device that's, XP or Windows 7 SPO or SP1, you might not be wanting to attach that to the network. It might never attach to the network. Well, how do you get the files on and off that without using something like a USB? And then you have data replication and sync with all sorts of things happening around Industry 4.0 and industrial IoT. People want access to this monitoring data now so that they can make these decisions. How is these data getting to the right hands, into the right databases, the right analysis? And then finally, one that always gets a smile and a nod is third-party laptops. Vendors, contractors coming on site with their laptop because they have software installed on it that they need access to. It's like, well, how can you ensure that those laptops are clean, are safe? Just some things that we'll discuss with you and talk to. So what's the problem? where's the risk? You just said the file's coming in and out. Well, this is the scary slide that everyone puts together. I quickly slammed this together and I just grabbed 4 headlines that from this year, all from 2024. And I thought, well, I'll just grab them based on USB. I just mentioned USB a minute ago. Well, why not? These are 4 attacks that made the headlines regarding malware. Because, you know, files are coming in and out. How do you ensure they're clean? Because majority of the attacks are probably file-based malware. Even if you're talking more sophisticated OT threats, you know, utilizing things like living off the land, all those sort of techniques, at some point they probably may have had some sort of delivery mechanism. It quite often would have been file-based. You know, it just is a stark reminder, really, to show that even the oldest tricks in the book can still be highly effective and something that we have to be aware of. And then quite often now you might be talking to a few people, especially in the IT side, and they go, it's okay, our company blocks USBs. It's our policy to block all USBs. And I guess the question there is, are they blocking USBs or are they blocking mass storage devices like thumb drives, like USB hard drives? Because that's completely different to blocking USBs. Because if they're allowing, I don't know, human interface devices, HIDs, such as USB keyboards, so that you don't constantly have to whitelist all the different USB keyboards that are being plugged in, then there's quite often attacks that can be happening there that you have to be aware of and try and protect against. Things like bad USB, Bash Bunny, Rubber Ducky, things you can easily buy off the internet, not that expensive, you can program, and what they are is they pretend to be human interface devices like keyboards. They're using keyboard injection attacks. So you plug this USB in and it thinks it's a keyboard. That's what it's emulating, imitating. And so the PC, the device just says, yeah, this is fine. And then because of its injecting keyboard, it just immediately starts hitting keys and all sorts. Imagine what a threat actor could do if you just put him in front of an unlocked laptop with a keyboard. You know, you can delete files, rename files, copy files down, bring them in, remote access, you know, Trojan, whatever you want, you could do very quickly, very easily. And it's all just happening by just plugging it in. So I think it's more of not just a matter of, am I blocking the USBs, but what are you blocking, or how can you protect against these sort of attacks as well? Okay, and this isn't, and I'm sure you're all sat there going, yeah, we know, but this isn't blue sky thinking. It's not like wow, this is all new to me. Everyone knows about this. I mean, that's why there's compliance and standards and frameworks all talking about it. I mean, if you just pull a few of them out, the NCSE CAF, that has a whole, I think, what are they? Principles, a whole data security principle with outcomes on understanding data, data in transit, stored data. The NIST CSF, I mean, that has categories on data security, information protection. Its protection technology actually has a subcategory on dedicated to removable media. If you look at, I don't know, 62443, that has foundational requirements in, what is it? Is it system integrity, information integrity, information confidential? It said the list goes on. So it's not new. It's just, well, what can we do about that? What's the answer? For us personally, because obviously we're biased, for us, we've got a solution, a back end that helps to ensure files that are coming in and leaving are clean and safe. We call it our core because it's core to what we do. And that's it. And it doesn't matter where the files come from, they can be cleaned. So today we're talking about a number of solutions, but they can come from anywhere, whether it's sent via, you know, ICAP, an API, a WAF, a next-gen firewall, maybe it's sent by a load balancer, maybe it's a kiosk, because every one of our USB scanners is running a core. Again, it's just a matter of getting the files to the core for it to look at, to sanitize, to ensure, give you a verdict, and then you know if it's good or bad and okay to continue and allow it either in or out. It's that simple. So what is the core? I guess the next question is, how do you deploy it? And at a very high level, it's what do you want it to be? It can be on-premise, it can be in the cloud, it's a Linux installer, it's a Windows installer, it can be virtual, physical, containers it'll run on. The whole point is it's a simple install. It's a Windows install, a Linux install, and then each of the Scanning technology that we'll quickly mention is just a matter of just enabling it or disabling it. You're not installing it in many different areas or things like that. It's that easy, that quick, and that simple. Okay, so let's dig into the core a little bit further. So why do many of the CNIs utilize our core? And the main reason is because of this layered file protection, because we don't take files at the face value. The first thing we'll do is we will break a file apart, and we will, first of all, we'll decrypt it and we'll extract it to all of its many different layers, doesn't matter how deep it is, because that's quite important. I was given the other day, just an example, someone gave me a 300 meg file, and you think, well, that's not big. It's 300 meg, it's one file, that shouldn't take long. And it was an executable, an installer. But when it was actually ran through the core, we realized that actually it had 70,000 objects within it. It had cab files within cab files. It had MSIs within MSIs. It might have had MSUs in there. There were so many different files, or let's call them objects, within there, that this wasn't a simple install. And all it takes is one of those files to be bad without you knowing, and you could be compromised. And how do you know the files are what they say they are? Just because they say they're a TXT file, how do you know they're not an executable or a script or something? You know, you can't take it at face value. And I'll quickly rush through here, but as you can see, these layers are starting to come on and come on and come on. You know, what are you going to allow? Are you going to allow it based on name, size, things like that, block based on that? What countries are you going to allow or block? What vendors are you going to allow and block? There's loads that can be done. Are you going to look at some of the threat intelligence? Is it already known good or known bad? What other intelligence are there on these types of file or this file? Are you having a look at if it's an executable? Has it got any vulnerabilities, that executable? Is it known exploitable? Just because it's not malicious and there's no malware in there doesn't mean that maybe it's an old S7 firmware. You know, there's known CVs on there. Well, you should know about that. And then you can make decisions on that. And then the one that most people talk to us about, which is the multiple AV scanning. You know, having multiple AVs, because people now, when you start looking at many of the customers I'm talking to, it starts off on, well, how many AVs do you support? Because they've realized one AV at the perimeter is just not good enough, not when it comes to efficacy. And the more engines you get, the closer you become to 100% efficacy. That's the bottom line. You know, hence why people talk to us, how many can you do? And we've been doing this, as Simon said, for 20 odd years now. So we've had to build these relationships with these vendors. It's not easy. We pay royalties, hence why we support well over 30. And these are the proper engines. So they will contain heuristics, AI, signatures, things like that. It's not the free version, hence why you can be quite confident. But this is malware protection. You know, these are known bad things, but not everybody knows about them at the same time. And here is an example that I grabbed of where I was throwing malware through a core with some of the AV engines. I've blurred out the to protect the innocent, let's say. But I was, you know, you could be sometimes quite surprised at some of the more well-known AV vendors that miss it. And it, you know, that could be because they're concentrating on a specific malware family, or depending on the region they're in, you know. So that's why sometimes having more than one makes a lot of sense. And also, the more you've got, the more you can almost do a voting process to help with, you know, false positives, things like that. Maybe you say, well, okay, it needs at least 2 of them to say it's suspicious, or maybe 2 to say it's blocked. Maybe you're not relying on 1, again, because you could get the overzealous signature file. It's whatever's workable for you guys. Perfect. So let's quickly move on. I won't spend too long now on this. As you can see, you're starting to get an idea of what it takes to ensure a file is clean. It's not a matter of just right-clicking, clicking scan, hopefully the signatures are updated, and then carrying on. No, there's a lot more to it, because this is, you know, your crown jewels. The last thing you want to do is get a breach. Information protection. Maybe you're allowing or not allowing files based on a tag, a classification, or maybe it is actual DLP information. Normally, I'd labor a lot on this. I'd start talking about deep inspection, deep CDR. It's one thing we do very well. We love it. It's basically how you can start moving to protect against 0 days. But it's not for executables. This is for your business files, your Word documents, your PDFs, your JPEGs, your images, videos, Excel, Word, all of those sort of files. And it's splitting them open and digging deep into them to ensure they are what they are, and they say they are. Because even nowadays, a simple Word document, I remember when it used to be a glorified text file. Now it's got so many embedded objects. You can even embed, not just fonts, but you can embed, let's say, a Word document, which within an Excel, within a PDF that might have an image file with stenography, that might have an executable in there that does a callback. There's loads that can happen within a file. You can't, again, with the files themselves like that, you can't take them on face value. But what do you want to do with those sort of files? Do you want to simply block Excel files that have a macro in them? No worries. Do you want to sanitize images to ensure that there's no embedded files? Not an issue. You want to change all Word documents into PNG files? Of course. Or maybe you want to de-weaponize a PDF and deliver it completely clean and safe so it can never be compromised. Easy. It's what works best and what kind of steps you need. All possible, all within that simple installer that I mentioned at the beginning. This is all there. And then for the advanced threat protection, there is an adaptive sandbox. Many people know what a sandbox is. It's there to try and see what happens when you run a file, to try and catch those 0 days, or really when you're a bit unsure of a file, you're in that gray area. This gives you a little bit more to tell you if it's good or bad, a little bit more information around running of the file. Ours has to be, because we try to keep it small, quick, it has to be inline. So it's not like a traditional sandbox, which is all based on virtualization and is quite heavy, and you have to send the file off. Problem is, it's no longer in line now. And if you've sent that file off, by the time you get a verdict, you've probably already sent the file. The horse has bolted. You've got a patient 0. How do you, do cleanup now? Whereas for us, it's all about emulation. So we try and as we're running this, when the questions come back, we answer yes to them all. Can I have access to this? Yes. Can I do this? Yes. Yeah. And we keep saying yes, kind of thing, or the correct response in order to get that indicator of compromise so that we can say, you shall not pass. And then we know. And then by all means, at that point, feel free to start exploding it. But we've just made sure that it hasn't continued. You're still safe and secure. And then the final one I'll talk about before we move on is something that everyone's talking about now, is your supply chain, your software supply chain. If you're bringing across containers or Python scripts, it's being able to check header, so when it gets compiled, it's not actually going to be dragging in insecure or old libraries. It's that kind of thing, which is always an added bonus. Okay. So, and it's not an all or nothing. So different projects, different networks, different solutions that are sending files, different users, groups could possibly go through a different workflow. They don't have to be doing all of this. It's all modules that can be turned on and configured differently based on where it's coming from or based on the user. Very simple, very easy. But again, showing you, or at least giving you an indication of why people are coming to us when it comes to file protection. Okay, so let's quickly see where that would fit in the grand scheme of things. I've talked to you about, the type of protection you should be expecting. So now how do we apply that? So let's start with the oldie, but I think still a goodie. This is a lot of people still come to us and say, we need help with USB. What can we do? How do we move away? Things like that. But what do we do today? Because, it's a very common OT use case. And I think Simon says, he's mentioned it before. We've said the word kiosk. We've got many different form factors that will fit in many of the different solutions, whether we're talking rugged tablets that you can carry around, whether it's ones that go on the wall, whether it's ones that stand on a stand, little ones, big ones, all touch screen, all easy to use, and used throughout the world. We even can customize them. So if you want to make a statement, we have many customers out there that go for our ones that look like ATMs. They put them in reception or somewhere really obvious, and it's kind of like, you shall not pass unless you've scanned your USB. Again, it's what works, what fits the business well, and what's easy. And although I guess threat protection and security is key, it's no good if it's hard. It has to fit into your business flows. You have to be able to, I guess, enable the business, not be detrimental. And that's where we've worked hard to make sure that the business workflows within our USB scanners or kiosks are, tie into whatever workflow you want. Whether it is, do I need a guest access? Is it allowing to log into Entra or AD? Am I allowed local authentication? What happens then? Is it going to ask other questions like my badge ID or work order? What kind of media is it allowing to scan? Is it USBs, encrypted USBs, CDs, phones? What am I scanning? I've got an allow list or a block list of USBs. What do I do then? Am I processing encrypted files? Am I allowing them to browse the USB to select files, or is it going to be the entire USB disk every time? Is that going to be based on the user, a group? What happens when I get a good result? Is it going to copy it to a second USB, a whitelisted USB, so it goes from one USB to another, and they're the only ones I'm allowed on site? If it's bad, what then? Is it going to quarantine? Is it going to remediate? What happens? As you can see, there's lots to discuss. It could just be, now I want it as a simple sheep dip. I'm just going to plug a USB in, it's going to scan it, and I'm going to walk away. Simple. But it's like, well, okay, well, where can you go after that? And this is the kind of thing that we can do, and we've got simple touch screens, simple screens to make the user experience really well and work the way that it needs to work. And then I guess the following question we always get asked is, well, then how can you enforce that the processes are being followed? How can you ensure that they've actually scanned that USB? And that's where we have a validation driver and endpoint that's lightweight. All it's doing is checking to ensure that that USB has been scanned, well, on which files have been scanned. And based on the files that have been scanned, they're the only ones that are allowed. If a file's on there that's changed and hasn't been scanned, then you'll be able to see it, but you won't be able to copy it off. You won't be able to open it. You won't be able to double click it. You won't be able to do anything on it. And it's simple. We've tried to make it as operationally possible as well. So not only is it lightweight, standalone, doesn't ever call out. It is almost like a set and forget. We can also do other things in there as well. It's got badge USB protection to help protect against rubber ducky, bash bunny, things like that, etc. And if you've got devices out there, you're like, well, I can't install anything on this. These are proper locked down, or the resource constraints. Then we have a hardware agent, which looks like the Apple TV there. But you plug the USBs in and that goes, and that almost becomes your boundary there as well. So plenty of things. It's just a matter of, speaking to us what works best. So what I always do and what I find, and this is a slide that I put together, is, well, how does all of this start fitting together? What about day 2 or whatever? How can I move away from potentially a sheep dip? How can I start talking to the CTO and things like that to say what I'm doing to try and limit USB access, if we're talking there, or what can I do about these files? And so I thought, I'm not going to lie, I love a whiteboard. So I created a slide based on a whiteboard, because you can't often get whiteboards where you want. And I called it A Day in the Life. And it's all about data in motion. So bear with me, I've got some artistic license here. But let's go through a very simple scenario, which is more common than you think. But let's say we've got Bill in America. Here he is over here, and he's come into reception. He's got a USB or a CD, and on it has a patch for or a config file or something that he needs to apply to a HMI in the OT. So in he comes, plugs it into the removable media scanner, which then, hence why I went through the core, goes through the embedded core, all of those different things that you've enabled. That's great. We now know that what files are clean and what are dirty. So at this point, it could have wiped that USB and then copied back the clean ones. It could have copied it to a second USB that's pre-approved. It could have answered questions, could have logged in. He's a guest, so the chances are he was just given a guest ID. That's great. And that's a very good first start. But what's next? What would have been better is if it would automatically have copied those clean files to a vault, a Windows server that's running encryption on disk. Very simple, very easy, and it's now on the network. But the benefit of this is it will constantly be scanning those devices based on your config. So just because the file is deemed as clean now doesn't mean that it's not a known threat in 8 hours, 12 hours. So that rescanning is very important. It also has supervisor approval. So just because it's now within this encrypted on disk, repository, this vault, doesn't mean that everyone should be able to access it. So you now, yeah, it's clean, but now the supervisor or the supervisor of the supervisor can come in and say, yeah, I'm happy for this to be available for people within the low network. Remember, this is still the IT network, the low network. And at this point, it can be shared. People can grab it via a GUI, SharePoint, a folder, an API. You've now got access to this file. I mean, I've got on the right side, you can see there, the quarantine bit. As you can see, there's no reason why quarantine devices don't go to, let's call them a dirty vault. So anything bad goes to a dirty vault, and then your SOC team can spend hours looking at these files, discovering what they were trying to do. It's not a problem, keeping them completely separate and segregated. Easy. But still, all in the IT. What would have been better is based on approval, based on the fact it's clean, it can then automatically be synced to another vault, or MFT, in the high network, in your level 3.5. It doesn't have to go across the data diodes. Obviously, we do data diodes, hence why I put that in there to show it can be physically a one-way movement, but it could easily be firewall, or if you're crazy, no firewall. But now you know that the file has crossed that boundary. It's clean, it's had supervisor approval, and I put another core in this diagram in the 3.5. Doesn't need to be rescanned there because you already have had it scanned, but maybe you do because you're also using that to upload files and share files in 3.5. But now these files can be accessed by your SCADA, your secure servers. Very simple, very easy. I mentioned a second ago, secure remote access. Quite a lot of people now are looking at secure remote access directly into their 3.5, which is not a problem. It's all audited, it's all secure. The thing is, it's a secure channel of moving the files in. Doesn't mean the files are clean. So all potentially you might be doing is transferring the bad files securely. Why not ICAP that off? So the core can scan it. So at least you know the files are clean that are coming across. Because there's no point doing a checksum before and after. Yeah, you're not only are you securely transferring it, but you can ensure that the malware is the same before and after. Well done. But let's actually check it to make sure it's clean as part of your SRA as well. And then maybe automatically sending it to different zones. Maybe different networks. Maybe it's going across another data diode to your safety zone, let's say an extra high zone. And then once it's there, it can be doing anything it wants. You can grab it from an SFTP, a GUI, depending on where it is. It's all very simple, very easy. It's about automating this and making life much better and controlled as it goes across the boundaries. And I'm a big fan of something that I talk to a lot of people about is I mentioned, I can't remember what I said his name was, but let's say it's Gary. He's changed his name. He logs in, he puts his files here in America in the reception. That then gets sent up here to this vault, gets approval, it's scanned, this gets sent to here, this then automatically can get sent to here, and it's now sitting, let's say, in a vault in Scotland. Then Sally can come along, she plugs in her USB stick, or SD card, I guess, into the kiosk. She asks Gary for his ID, he gives in the guest ID he was given, that would automatically retrieve those files, scan them again for good luck, and then put it on the pre-approved USB. At that point, Sally can then walk that USB over to a HMI that's running the agent so it can ensure that these files are only the ones that have been scanned and are allowed, and then apply it. It's all about allowing and making this a much easier, seamless, because it doesn't have to be about putting files on, it could be getting files off as well. Very simple. Hopefully this is starting to make you think of different use cases or how this could make life easier. Many of you out there are probably going, hang on a minute, well, what if I was to put one of these vaults in Azure or in the cloud somewhere or in our IT DMZ? Suddenly, our external third parties could have actually uploaded that file weeks ago. They didn't have to come on site with a USB. We could get rid of, potentially, the use of the USB at this level, the use of the USB over here. You know, you could get rid of that because the file's coming in here. Simple. You know, could have been that your local IT department were downloading them off the internet, and then they were loading them to the MFT and started the whole transfer at this level before it went on. Many different ways this could work. It's not an all or nothing. I mean, I always throw in there and say, well, why couldn't an email attachment? You email it in and it starts the train there as well. One thing that people do say when I get to this point is I've been very much talking about low to high. A lot of people are saying that's a no-go for us. We're not interested in that. We're interested in getting files out. Not a problem. Hopefully, just flip it round. Basically, over here on this side then, there's no reason why this is now, you know, this is always going to be a sheep dip. This might never go away, ever. But then why can't these files send the files this way and automatically get files into this vault, maybe into this vault, and then your third parties can grab them out of the web GUI? Or maybe automatically send them to a SFTP server. Or very easy, very quick. It's just a matter of thinking, what would enable our business to work better? And instead of thinking of potentially some of the handicaps of using a USB, but thinking, well, they're a requirement, what can we do to help with that? So I've been talking a lot about data in motion, but I'm going to stick with that for just a little bit longer, because even though it's USB, I'm talking as well here, because that still is data in motion. It still is, if we're going to be honest, a conduit. It's just your feet. But a lot of people now will be saying, yeah, but there's other data when we're talking OT, especially now, as I mentioned earlier, with Industry 4.0, industrial IoT. You've got all these sensors now with 5G and things like that. Quite often, they're not actually going via the regular means to get these data. They want access to monitoring data now. Quite often, they're ignoring that and they're going straight to cloud, whether it's, you know, log files to Emerson Delta V Cloud or G Cloud or Azure. You know, they're using MQTT to the cloud. Well, how can you ensure these little devices that even if they are going direct and they're bypassing some of the controls, that you can ensure that there's no way, you know, there's no back channel, there's no way, there's no return traffic, there's no return responses, there's nothing. How can you ensure that physically? Well, the only way is data diodes, dim rail data diodes, little small form factors. They're there, and that's something we're seeing a big, I guess, interest in at the moment. And data diodes are there for other stuff as well. They're not there to replace the next-gen firewall unless the next-gen firewall's in the wrong place. They're there generally to complement it. It could be that you're using it between a PLC and a HMI as part of some sort of, I guess, east-west protection segmentation. I'm a big fan of this next one. A lot of people might start poking holes and creating SRA just to see HMI screens. So why would you do that when you could just use the data diode and the software on the data diode to actually mirror the actual screens to your level 4? Why are you poking holes into level 3, 5 when you could just do it, you know, mirror it out there and then no one's even going in there? You want access to monitoring syslog? Then just send it out via a data diode. That way you're still keeping that boundary nice and secure. Why not, if you want access to the historian, you know, like pies or something like that, then why not just replicate the pie over the data diode? We have connectors that'll do that, or the databases. So suddenly you're not giving access into where they shouldn't have access just because it's easier or it's what should be done. I just put a simple data diode there that'll replicate it for you. That simple. And that's enough. I'll talk about data in motion because I think I've done that to death. What about data at rest? You could have out there NASes that have been in the environment for years. Have they ever been scanned? Wonder what's on there. You know, you got NetApps. Just because it's stored and it's at rest, backups and things, surely they still need scanning. I always like to joke that everyone says, yeah, IT is the one affecting OT. But maybe it's going to be one day OT affecting IT because they might have some very old virus that hasn't been known, seen in the wild in 10, 15 years. And most of the signatures have forgotten about them, because if they're not seen, then quite often they'll be moved out of the main signature package of the traditional vendors. And then suddenly it's the OT that comes out of nowhere to infect the world. I don't know. And there'll just be me phoning my mum going, I told them. But anyway. And then, I'm talking on-premise storage, but this could easily be cloud storage. Again, it's just about thinking of the core being the scanner and everything else just being connectors. Doesn't matter if it's a SaaS or if it's S3, blobs, whatever. It's just, how do I get these files to the core for it to do its thing, for it to see if a file's good or bad? And we've got many of these connectors. If not, like I say, we've got all this stuff like ICAP support, ICAP servers, we've got APIs, lots of different things. So there's loads of ticks. I think I've covered virtually everything apart from the last one, the third-party laptops. For when you got vendors, contractors, and these other use cases, it's just that's the one that seems to resonate initially. It's like, what can we do there? And this is where we have a little, about the size of a Toblerone, one of those tiny Toblerones, that will scan the laptop at boot. So what we do is you boot from USB. It uses everything we mentioned on that core, multiple AVs and things to scan the hard drive. So we don't care if it's XP, Windows 7 or anything like that. If it's BitLocker, it'll request the recovery key, or it can get the recovery key if you're able to run it. We've got many ways of doing that. So we fully support encryption. We don't try and brute force encryption or use some sort of weird rainbow tables or anything, because otherwise encryption would be not very good if it was that easy. You have to give the recovery key. But yeah, we can do all sorts of scanning. Quick scans, full scans, custom scans. It depends, workflows, depends on what works best for you guys. But the whole point is it scans the laptop, you get a report, and then if there's any files that are looking a little bit unusual or would have been flagged, then you can make that decision to find out what those files are. And you could even, if you want, you could create a custom scan on a directory, scan it when they come in, scan that same directory as they leave, and if there's discrepancy, you can start asking, well, hang on, why is this folder different? There's loads that can be done with this. It's just a nice little simple solution. And I think the question probably people are already saying is, how long does it take? How long's a piece of string? It all depends on how quick the laptop is, what it is you're scanning, and things like that. So yeah, this is just a nice, simple MD drive. I think, Simon, over to you, mate. I think I've.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Fed up of hearing my voice.
Yeah, so guys, hopefully, you found that useful. Obviously, we spoke about our USB kiosk scanning capability. We spoke about data diodes. We covered MD drive. We covered our managed file transfer, which again is becoming more and more of interest, and it's probably one of our largest sort of discussion points at the moment as well. But from our overall OPSWAT approach, you can see on the screen there, we are market leader in what we're doing from a multi-scanning capability in deep CDR. We do have that 20 years experience. We are trusted by many. There's a number of use cases. There's, a number of footprints now across energy sites, utilities, nuclears. And we do have a customer testimonial as well, which they're always hard to get, especially in nuclear, but we do have a really strong, and I'd recommend, if anyone is interested, go on the website, click in it and look for the Doonray customer testimonial, where they talk about the kiosk and the impact the USB sort of scanner kiosk has had. And they also talk about the MD drive on there as well. So it's not just us saying it, the guys were open to us doing a video on site, and, guys, it's a cool video. So yeah, it's good.
No, it was a really good presentation, and just want to thank yourself, Simon, and obviously Steve for delivering that. It was quite good, really comprehensive, quite detailed. And as I say, thanks again. I've got no questions from my side. I don't know whether the guys or on the call, anyone got any questions for Stephen or Simon, then fire away.